home on a rainy day. I was lost and wandering around.
Hey, I'm Joe Iconis.
And I'm Jennifer Ashley Tepper, and you are listening to the Album Podcast on the Broadway Podcast Network.
Today we're going to be talking about my song, My Best Friend's a Skeleton, which is a song that I wrote for a Halloween show at the Beechman, originally for Eric William Morse and Jeremy Morse, but on the album sung by George Salazar and Jeremy Morse.
In this episode, you may learn that Joe Iconis once tried to write a song called My Teddy Bear's a Cokehead, a fact which I did not know until we recorded this podcast episode. So you just never quite know what you're going to get on the Album Podcast.
That's right. Spills, thrills, chills. Hear them all now.
Don't be so hard on yourself. It's not that bad. I mean, you're a great dancer.
I've been stretching.
I can see that. Have you been taking dance classes?
I've taken some tap because, boy, do my feet really sing on the floor.
Oh. We pick up chicks.
My Best Friend's a Skeleton. So the last song, I guess, could kind of be considered a Mother's Day song. This could kind of be considered a Halloween song, one of several Halloween songs you've written. What was the original inspiration for My Best Friend's a Skeleton?
So My Best Friend's a Skeleton, I wrote for a Halloween show at the Beechman. And I wrote it specifically for Eric William Morse to sing as the main guy, and then for Jeremy to play a skeleton. And I remember when I was writing it, not fully knowing what the skeleton character would be, but just knowing that Jeremy would do something crazy with it. And so it's a weird sort of instance of writing knowing the actors, but not exactly knowing what they'll bring to the table, just knowing that it's going to be great. And so I mean, it's like this one was a pretty like simple write. I had the title, My Best Friend's a Skeleton, cooking like in my brain for quite a while. Like I remember that sort of sticking in my brain, and I went through a time period where I kept trying to write songs where it's like my something's a something. Like I had a song that I tried to write for years called My Teddy Bear's a Cokehead, and and I think I might write it yet, but it's like it was like my something's a something song, and My Best Friend's a Skeleton. It just couldn't. It never died. You know, it just kept sticking around. And then for this one Halloween show, it just kind of like came fully formed. That song. It was, yeah.
I just had to think about this because obviously, like, I've heard Eric do it. We've had multiple people doing it, including George Salazar and Jeremy on the album. But the Halloween show that I remember was Lance and Jeremy doing it at 54 Below. Like the only time we did a show around Halloween at 54
Yeah.
Below.
Yeah.
So there's been like a lot of different people doing this song.
The guy who's the sort of lead singer of it, he's multiple great actors have played that role. And Jordan Stanley, who sang Slide Whistle on the album, he played skeleton for something. I can't quite remember what. But Jeremy has been the skeleton of note since since the beginning. And and it was really just like it's a song that, sort of like so many of my songs that kind of that deal with people who feel like they don't quite fit in, and like, kind of normalize a certain type of person. I mean, that's just what it is. It's just sort of like an ode to a friendship that is unconventional, but doesn't feel that way to the parties involved.
Sometimes I also felt like when you were in the planning stages with this album, it was like those problems from math class where it's like Sarah has a blue pencil, but she has to color like this and at 4 o'clock, and it was like a lot of if this then that. And I feel like George Salazar, who does an incredible job with this number, it was kind of an interesting thing of figuring out what he should sing because you already have the Two Player Game album where he sings so many of your songs, as well as other albums like Be More Chill where he's singing them. So like how did you kind of land on George singing this song, or was it like, method of elimination?
Yeah, no, it's like sort of exactly as you say, it's just because different people are associated with different songs and all that. When I do even a concert, it's like always this crazy like sort of puzzle of okay, what songs do I want to include, and then who typically sings those songs, and how can I shake it up so it's not a concert where Eric William Morris is singing 15 songs and everyone else is sharing like the remaining two, because that like can happen sometimes. And so with the album, it was very much that, where it was kind of like, okay, I want to do skeleton. Eric's already singing a bunch on the album, and then it was like, George, as you said, because we have two-player game, he's recorded so many of my tunes. How do I get him something that feels specific to this album and something that would be appropriate for him? And skeleton just felt like, oh, this kind of makes sense. And I what I loved about it was that, George is such an incredible performer, but he's so huge, and he does these characterizations that are so like off the wall and explosive. I really liked the idea of George Salazar playing the straight man in something, which is something that he so rarely gets to do. And to have Jeremy Morse be the one who's kind of like, off the wall and just making these big, huge, insane choices.
Totally. And
Yeah.
remind me, were they in the same place when they recorded this? Like, when was this one recorded?
Oh my God. No, so George was in LA. So George recorded all of his stuff in a vacuum, right? So like George just like did it, and he and I, in the session would like sort of come up with like one-liners and come up with like the setups to jokes with the knowledge that Jeremy would then deliver the punchline in like a month in New York City, just listening to it. So it was such a strange way to like craft this thing that really is just like a duet and a like two-hander between these two awesome comedic actors. But I think because of that, because it was like the comedy was made in such a strange way with so much time and space between both halves, I think it does give the song this kind of like bizarre. There's like something slightly off. They are going back and forth, but there's this like vague awkwardness that I think feels true to the relationship of the human being and the skeleton
I'm
who's
gonna have
alive.
to listen for that. Yeah. I feel like it's such a supernatural song always to have like a
Mhm.
creature, a skeleton that I'm excited to listen for that. Um, Did you ever consider, because there are like multiple songs on the album that you wrote for like Halloween, or that are sort of like supernatural or spooky in some way? Did you ever consider like, do I group songs like that together? Like, how did you, we've talked about this a little bit in past podcasts, but how did you pick like the album order? And did you take that kind of thing into account?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, there's because of the amount of songs, 44 in total. Like there are all of these like sort of subsections that feel connected in different ways, and it's like the and so when I was looking at the track list and trying to figure out where things fit, and for the most part when we recorded, I didn't have the order in my mind. We were just kind of recording the songs in the wild, and I had a few suspicions about like, oh, maybe I'll, write this song called Album for the top of the thing, and maybe I'll have Try Again be at the end of the thing. But otherwise, I really wasn't recording thinking like, oh, okay, this song is going to go into this song. I was just sort of treating them as individuals and then figuring it out later. And so when I was sort of looked at all of them, it was kind of like, okay, like here's this like large group of songs that feel Halloweeny or sort of related to horror movies. And like, here's this group of songs that deals with like teenagers, and here's this group of songs that deals with suburbia, and then I had, like New York City songs. And so I, initially it was like, is there a way to kind of like group these songs together so that they create these little like mini musicals or something, or these little like, mini suites of songs. But then I just kind of I felt like, the thing that really joins these songs together is not the subject matter, it's the thematic material. It felt like like the just because like there's a bunch of songs with creatures doesn't necessarily mean those songs all hang together in an organic way, and it felt like the things that the creatures were singing about were the things that I wanted to use to kind of be the glue to hold all the songs together. And so then it was like, okay, so now I know this. So now let me use like the vibes of the music and the deeper meanings of the lyrics to create this kind of like up and down flow of energy that will take us through the 44 tracks. And that sort of turned into, for the most part, making sure that we didn't group all the Halloween songs together and that we didn't group all the teenage songs together. And so maybe you get like, two together, or, or sometimes more. But I really wanted things to feel kind of interspersed. So it was like, oh, a Creature song was mingling with a Suburban song, was mingling with with a song about a a teenager going through something. So it feels like it's pretty varied and eclectic. There's one transition that I love. That's it goes from uh, I believe Haddonfield into Sympathy for the Killer. And I love the idea of like, Haddonfield is the song that's um that's that's inspired by the Halloween movies and Michael Myers, and Sympathy for the Killers, sort of like, using horror movies as a way to talk about relationships. And so I like that it's like those two songs feel like they're in conversation with each other, even though stylistically they're so different. So there are moments like that throughout the album, but
Can you talk about, for a song like this, obviously the band, the musicians are recorded separately than the actors as well. And when it's a song where there are comedic moments that require like real specificity from instrumentalists, like what was that process like in the studio? And like how do you kind of work with the people like on the music team and with Ian to tell the musicians how to play in these like, moments where there might be a joke or there might be like a cue that involves them?
yeah, I mean, this song is a perfect example of, we were able to achieve this because all of the artists involved know each other so well. And so it's like, we had to do it in the like sort of the opposite order that you'd want to do it in, where we had to record the music first and then the two actors individually. When in a perfect scenario, everyone would just be in a studio together and we would just kind of do it in real time. But with doing the music first, it's like always about, allowing space so that once the actors lay down their performances, we can edit it all together, and so there's room for the jokes. And so it's like a lot of, because the musicians like, know my work so well and know like George and Jeremy, it was really easy for like Ian and I to say, okay, George will say something stupid here, and then Jeremy will like take it a little further. So let's just keep repeating these chords and keep going, keep going, keep going, and then we'll like figure out exact timing later. So it's like just sort of giving yourself enough material to play with so it can all be put together in the editing room, which is what we ended up doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, great. My best friend's a skeleton.
My best friend's a skeleton. And
I look
I will say one. Oh, we're gonna say
I look forward to hearing my teddy bear is a cokehead because I've never known about that
it's
potential
kind of,
prequel, sequel.
yeah, yeah. Kind of look out for it on album 2, The Return. Um, but what I was gonna say about my best friend's um a skeleton is that the one joke in it that's been in it, since the beginning. It's in the lyric, but I guess it's more the reaction to the joke. There's a part where the skeleton, um where the guy says, he'll always be inside of me, kind of meaning that because he's a skeleton, he'll be inside of him. But the skeleton sort of takes it slightly sexually. And so when we first started doing the song, I feel like the skeleton was kind of like, hey, dude, I'm not interested in that, and kind of like a, yeah, like what are you saying about me kind of way. And I love that. I love that now. I'm not saying that like the skeleton wants to be in a sexual relationship with the friend, but I just feel like the change, like the various changes in our culture have made the possibility for like a skeleton human sexual relationship that isn't like, there's no labels on it. It's just like two guys, or I mean, one guy and one skeleton, and like sometimes maybe they just are a little bit sexual with each other. It's like no big deal. It's like that just feels like okay and feels kind of like accepted and celebrated. And I think that's a nice marker of where we are as a culture.
Yeah, I'm open to it. Love is love.
Yeah, love is skeletons.
When my buddy isn't there.
Hey, thanks so much for listening or watching to my podcast. Do me a favor and go to wherever you just listen to or watch this thing and subscribe or like or give us a great rating or review, and then head to bpn.fm/album to find out even more information about this podcast, more ways to watch, more ways to listen, and check out my album. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Album Podcast is executive produced by Liz Armstrong, produced by Dori Berenstein, Alan Seals, Kim Garris, and the rest of the team at the Broadway Podcast Network. Be sure to visit bpn.fm/album for both audio and video versions of this podcast and to listen to Album.
Till the day that we shrivel up and die.
George, I love it that you have skin.
I love you, you old bag of bones.